Glory.
She's a mom, fitness competitor, and the fire marshal at the Springdale Fire Department. It's Terrah Timmerman. Welcome here to Lamps Lab, and appreciate you for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
So, like I was just saying, kind of want to get into, the full story. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Okeana. Most of the times I say that and people don't know where that is, but it's out in Morgan Township near Indiana. So it's 20 minutes from Springdale. So it's out in the country. So I grew up a little bit of a roughneck out there. So that's where I'm from. I had a little bit of a stint in Middletown for about a year when I was little, and then Coleraine for a period of time. But I'm originally from Okeana.
And did you grow up with both parents in the house?
Yep. So my mom and dad, they're both still married. I think very happy marriage, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a welder and a preacher. He's still a preacher now. So I grew up experiencing going to church a lot, and he traveled a bit, so I got to deal with that on the weekends. So yeah, my childhood was great. I mean, we played outside all the time. When I was growing up, they started introducing video games, so that was a little bit of an indoor activity. But for the most part, we were outside from the time that we woke up to the lunchtime. We came back and maybe summertime watched The Price is Right while we ate lunch, and then went back out until the sun went down. Otherwise, we played sports all the time. I was very athletic when I was growing up. So was my brother. So I was in sports constantly. We were outside a bunch. I was not necessarily the kid to play with dolls. I was talking to an elderly lady earlier. She's like, "You didn't grow up playing with dolls, did you?" I'm like, "How did you know?" So we'd play, Army Man, like war or whatever, me and my brother. I'm one of three children. I'm in the middle. And we'd be playing outside all the time. So I had a really great childhood over in Ross School District over there. And that's currently where I'm now, is over in that same area. So I was happy to get back to it.
So you said, was the brother older, I guess?
My brother was younger.
Oh, okay. So you have
Yeah.
an older sister, I guess?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
And played a lot of sports. Did you ever experience like how they say a middle child is kind of picked on a little bit, like the old Brady syndrome or anything like that?
I was quite the opposite. I was oftentimes the peacemaker between my younger brother and older sister. They would fight all the time, and I was just there in the middle. Very much introverted, so I was very quiet, artistic. So I was kind of keep to myself, keep the peace. And whenever we were in the car going to churches for my dad to preach, it'd be my brother on one side, my sister on the other, and I'd be in the middle, just kind of like trying to keep the peace between the two of them, because they would, bicker and fight at each other. So
Okay. So you were in the Ross School District. You said, were you a good student in school, or did you like school?
yeah, I enjoyed school. Like I said, I was pretty reserved, but I had a lot of friends that were very extroverted. So I have a tendency to attract those people because, introverts who listen and then extroverts who talk, they just kind of usually meld pretty well. But no, childhood was great. I did well enough in school. I was really, really focused on sports, though I was a decent student. I didn't struggle necessarily at all. English was my stronger point for me. And then I know at a certain point I wanted to become a writer, in the sense that I'd be a script writer. That's still not necessarily out of the question, but it was always in the back of my mind as something to do. I was into a lot of art as well. I was in band, choir. I was in probably too much at that point. Looking back at it, I'm like, why did I do this? Those you have those people who want to do all these things and you don't become really really good in all the things because you're doing too much versus, oh, I'm going to focus on one or two things, become really good at it. That's been a harder thing to do in my life, to kind of streamline it, to do the one or two things versus wanting to do it all. So that's how my childhood was.
So yeah, you were very active, you could say. What sports did you play, or what were you maybe the best in, or your favorite sports in high school?
My favorite was soccer. I don't know I was necessarily the best in it, but I felt confident in the place that I was doing rec when I was, preteen, to where, when you get to high school, there's tryouts. You don't just automatically get on the team, right? So, as I was later middle school into high school, I became more health fitness minded through my dad. He talked about bodybuilding, things of that nature. So he kind of introduced me to that side of things and being an athlete and how to prep for competition. And he was all about Mike Mincer, that whole mindset of bodybuilding. So he always had the Oxygen magazines or the Muscle and Fitness, and I'd be, just kind of reading through it, because that was kind of like how we researched things back in the day, was reading. So I learned as much as I could as a kid, and then when it came to prepping for high school soccer, there's JV and then there's varsity. So you always want to make varsity, right? For the most part, most athletes do. So I started prepping as much as I could on the summer. So as soon as school was out, I'd start conditioning for soccer, to have that had the goal of varsity. So that's when kind of the seed of preparing for competition, and being competitive really, really took off, because I'm like, well, if I don't feel like I'm hitting the bar, it's in my own hands. Like, I control where this goes. So I need to be the one who puts the time into it. So that's what I started doing, training at home. We had a couple things, some weights and just the standard home garage. And then once I could drive, I was able to go to the high school and go to the track, run drills, things of that nature. There was a little bit more control and the feasibility of me prepping myself for it versus it just being an idea of, oh, I wish I could, so it turned into preparing my conditioning for soccer. And I eventually got, to where I wanted to be on the team. And it instilled a little bit of grit in me at that time, as far as like, oh, I did this, I had this goal of getting to this one place, and I did it through sheer just putting in the work. So,
Yeah. And what I kind of just realized with you speaking of Ross, a bit of a connection. You probably know a friend of mine in Dick Ballard. Do you remember Coach Ballard much? And what do you remember about him when you were in school?
I remember him being very competitive. He had a strong personality, for sure. I mean, I know Megan Ballard as well. I believe she was in a grade below me, but yeah, all the Ballards, they were a very strong presence in Ross. So definitely know that. And that's the thing about Ross. Once you know one person, like, everybody. My graduating class was 200 some people, so it's not going to be like a Lakota or anything like that. So it's definitely a small area, which was nice, because everybody.
So you played sports in high school, graduated. What kind of was your path directly after graduating high school?
Well, I had all intents to, let's back up a little. Originally, I was thinking I was going to go to the Fenton Center for script writing to be able to start writing for movies, because I have the art side and then the athletic side. So the other side of me wanted to go to UC to start studying nutrition and dietitian. As far as the FAFSA and the scholarships and whatnot, and the cost of it didn't work out. So I decided to forego that and pursue personal training on my own. So I became a certified personal trainer for a period of time. All while I was doing that, I was just working, part-time jobs, as most teenagers do once they get out of school. So I was doing that, making ends meet in that fashion. And I had met my first husband, and I had my first child. So then that put a little bit of a damper on any array of plans, right? I knew I had intended on competing in bodybuilding on my first show, and that put a little bit of a roadblock into it, but obviously just the shock and challenge of becoming a young mom, uh, but it had to happen. So I went through that experience and then had prepped for my first show that I did in 2009 after having my first child. I think it was the Monster Mash in the Cincinnati. And it was a cool experience, because I had to prep for it. I had to do all the nutrition and lifting and whatnot. But it was my first one. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did at the same time. It was like, oh, this is cool. I'm learning. But it was a major learning experience to, if I'm going to be competing and making a name for myself in the fitness industry, there's a lot to it. So I did that, and I worked a couple just pretty much part-time jobs as a personal trainer, working in gyms. I did that for 5 or so years, and then eventually I got a good placed job at a pharmaceutical consulting company after I got my business degree. So I did go ahead and I went and got my business degree with the intent of owning a gym and preparing athletes for their, competition, whether it's sports or competing on stage. And I then realized, as when I was younger, that it's more than just getting that business degree that's going to allow you to open up a business. It costs money. So that hill had to be climbed for a period of time. And then the realization that, well, I still need to make ends meet because I've got a child and still need to make things happen. So I ended up getting a job at a pharmaceutical consulting company as an administrative assistant, which was like my, big girl job because I had, just rinky-dink part-time jobs prior to that. So I was excited for it. I learned a lot about clinical trials and the FDA and things of that nature. But I was the organizational side of it. So the organizational mind and mixed with the competitive mind worked out well for me in that position. After that point, the company laid me off because they had less work. And then, so there was a weird lull there in a period of my life where I was like, well, I need to figure out what I want to do, and I'd already been intrigued by fire service and the human body. So I knew that's like, I pursued some information as far as fire and EMS. But again, it was that tuition that always kind of was the stopping point for me as a young mother who, I had to pinch pennies. But eventually I ran into the program that was at Coleraine. They have a grant program that allows somebody who wants to get into fire service goes through their program, and they will fund it with their grant, your tuition. You just have to commit 2 years to their fire department. And I'm like, okay, well, here it is. This is the answer. So I pursued it, got more information. I met Captain Hopkins at Coleraine, who's an amazing guy. He told everybody about the information, and I learned, guess what? It's a competitive process. They're not just going to hand this to you. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be work, which, sure, great. So my competitive side took over there too. So went through their rigorous process of, there's a CVSA, which is like a polygraph. There's a physical agility. There's a whole array of other things, panel interviews that you have to go through because they can only fund so many people going through a class. And we were getting down to the wire. And I had learned that I was pregnant with my second child during this process. And I'm like, all right, how am I going to get this done? So I went ahead and decided that I would pursue it anyway. So I talked to Captain Hopkins. I said, hey, here's the situation, but I want to keep pursuing this. I'm confident in my ability to do it. But I knew it was, it's his programs, their whole thing. And he said, well, I'm old school, like pregnant ladies don't really go through fire school. But I said, as long as you can trust in how I feel about myself getting through it, please do. I think I can do it. Long story short, go ahead.
I was just saying, okay. Uh, I was going to back up a little bit
Yeah.
into the bodybuilding or fitness competing because I realized I learned uh, researching a little bit that there is a difference between bodybuilding and fitness competitions. Can you talk a little bit about that and what side of it were you more a part of?
So there's the general bodybuilding term, which is just the idea of just building the body from a certain point. But then there's competitions to where you can have a category that's like men's bodybuilding, and there's also still, there may be still in some competitions, women's bodybuilding. There's some places that have gone away with women's bodybuilding because they don't see it as marketable. But there's other categories like bikini, figure. There's wellness, which is the category that I'm currently going to be competing in. And then there's on the men's side, it hones down from bodybuilding to men's classic physique. So you need to think about bodybuilding for men and women as like the most muscle mass that you can have in the way that you're the leanest, you have lowest body fat, you're the most substantial up on stage. And then it kind of hones down to the other categories where your body fat might be a little bit higher, your aesthetic is a little bit different, the posing is different. So in women's bodybuilding and women's physique, you are required to do posing. So stage posing up on stage. You have your front double bicep, your tricep, posing, whatnot. So those are all required. You have to have a routine, and that's your presentation that you have up on stage, and they judge you on that. You get certain points for that. For things like figure, you have certain mandatories, but they're just like a front and a side, and it doesn't get as involved as a routine that women's bodybuilding would do. And then for wellness and bikini, there's specific front pose, side pose, back, and then you have your individual presentations where you are doing some variation of those poses, but you're trying to showcase your physique based on what their judging criteria is with your muscles. So they're looking for symmetry. Specifically for wellness, it's a more conditioned lower body. So your lower body is going to almost look borderline like women's bodybuilding. You're going to, like, your legs are going to be decently sized, and your conditioning is going to be very, very honed down to where your body fat is going to be very low, and your quads, your glutes, all that have a certain look that they want based on your variation to your waist and all that. There's a whole set of judging criteria that you can find on like npconline.org, I think it is, but they judge you on stage, and then you get your points, and then they put you in your placings. Center stage is where you want to be, and then they give out the awards based on that. Even beyond just your muscle, they'll also judge females specifically on your tan. That's why everybody looks so dark up on stage. They get their tan, which is 1 to 2 layers depending on how dark you are originally. And then they'll judge you on the color, which is crazy, but they will. They'll judge you on the color. They'll judge you on your hair and makeup and your marketability, your posing ability. So like if you're up there posing all like a robot versus flowy, and it looks nice and present, like they will give you good points for that. So there's a whole slew of things that they look at for that. I don't know if that answered your question, but it's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down.
Yeah. And I was going to ask about the tan too. That's funny you said that, but I did see that you've been successful in some of these competitions, placing or winning. What's kind of your quote unquote record or some of the awards you've won?
So I've placed my most recent one, 2021. So it's been a couple years since I've done it. I did place first in wellness in the Class A category, which is short. So there's A, B, and C. There actually may be some D's on some, but I'm 5'1", so I'm very short. And I think it goes up to 5.3. So like it's, obviously as short as you can get, up to 5.3. That's class A, and then class B and so on. I got first in that, as well as first in novice, and then first in women's wellness first responder. So they have these different categories that you can compete in, up against on stage, and you can get placings based on whatever category you are compared to the other people that are also in that category. And then whatever competition it may be, you'll get either a medal or a trophy. It just depends on the promoter who's doing the show. So the 2021 was the most recent one I had in the national. It was a nationally qualifying show. I just chose not to compete nationally that year. I decided to, it was the best that I had, best package that I had brought, and I decided to take a little break. So that fast forwards to today, where actually I'm out 1 week, about 1 week from my next show that I've been preparing for, which I feel like I've brought myself even better than where I was before. That 2021 show was the best placings that I had. They're the ones prior to that where I did compete in bikini. I got fourth. That was my first one that I did after I had my son in 2009. And then I did try physique. I tried that once where I was trying for like the bigger look. That was a little bit more, it was different. Let's just say that. I think I've placed sixth, I believe. So I think the highest I've placed was 15th, and they've been all within that range, and I've done about under 10 shows so far.
And kind of two questions here. What made you, kind of come back here 4 years later for a competition one, and what kind of goes into that preparation as far as the training, the diet, I assume is a big part. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I decided to come back because I am in life in a better place than I have ever been before, as far as my schedule. It's regimented now. So for the longest time working fire service, you work 24 hours and you're off 48. So and that's if you don't have overtime or anything like that in between. So the schedule is kind of sporadic. Like you can get into a flow, but it's harder. It is harder to prep for a show when you're on a 24/48. Currently on a Monday through Friday schedule, 8 to 4. So it made it very, very easy compared to be able to have my meals all planned out, measured out. Because I'm at the point now where I'm measuring my food, and that doesn't really happen until you're super, down to the wire. And food wise, I mean, it's chickens, rice, it's green beans, peanut butter. It's clean. It's real food though. There's a period of time where, as I was learning about food and whatnot, you want to latch on to this more processed stuff like protein bars and protein chips, or stuff that's going to make it easy, so to say. They'll get you results to a certain extent, but it's real whole food that will get you there a little bit cleaner. Ground beef is involved, sweet potatoes, Ezekiel bread. I have that in the morning as well. The Greek yogurt. I mean, it sounds simple. It's just basic stuff, but it's just a matter of making sure that you eat every couple hours, 2-3 hours, and that you're getting the right amount of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates based on whatever you're training for.
Okay. Well, good luck in that upcoming competition for sure.
Thank you.
Going back into fire service, like you said, so you got into the fire department, and I was curious about, it is 2025, and whenever you started, not long ago, but for I guess a while, that might have been considered a man job, and maybe looked. You kind of mentioned it a little bit with the Hopkins. So was there any thoughts about going into fire department as being a woman and kind of being, it's not a lot of women doing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you go in, that's in the back of your mind. As a female, it's in the back of your mind, but you kind of have to have this mindset to where, it doesn't I would say it doesn't matter. It sounds cliche, but sometimes what you decide that somebody else has decided is going to be like, this is what it's going to be. But once you experience the crews on shift, you then realize that there are good people that want you to succeed no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're a female or whatnot, as long as you can. I mean, if you need to be able to physically do the job, yes, for one, that's important. Two, to be able to do the job when it comes to the knowledge of what you're doing, because it's fire and it's EMS. If you can stand your ground on showing, yes, I can pull the ladder and get the job done. It may not look the same way, but they say there's more than, one way to skin a cat, as they say. As long as you do the job safely and you still get the job done, a lot of people over time realize that that's what matters. It's not a matter of, oh, well, you don't look like the typical person, that we think that it should be. That is irrelevant when it comes to the job actually getting done. I know there's plenty of all female crews that are out there. I follow a couple pages on Facebook of it's all female firefighters. They drive the engine, they drive the tower, they drive the ambulance, they do all the EMS stuff, all the fire stuff. They get all the same benchmarks done. The goalpost doesn't have to be moved for them. So there is that level of doubt, or that level of, oh, well, I feel like I gotta go above and beyond what maybe a standard male would do, and then I feel like, well, I gotta do this to show that I can get there. But after years of being in the fire service, you realize it's, as long as you are the best that you can be and you're still surpassing the standard, then that's all that matters. People are going to say things no matter what, but it's just a matter of standing your ground and understanding what you can do and knowing that you're going to get the job done no matter, regardless.
What are those 24-hour shifts like just at the fire department? I've kind of always been curious about just how they live there for periods of time and then go home. What's kind of that like, and having that type of schedule?
Well, so I can compare it to the other departments that I worked at when I worked the 24, 48s. So you obviously go into work early. If you're one of the rookie guys, you're going in there and you're making the coffee. You got to set, that's the most important part, is making the coffee for everybody. Getting all the, let's say you do your chores, you get all the dishes out, you fold the laundry and whatnot. And then once that's set for the day, you figure out what apparatus you're on. So if you're on the engine, you're on the tower, you're on the ambulance, whatnot. Once you know what you're on, you go put your gear in that apparatus. So a lot of fire stations will have gear lockers. So you'll have your gear there with you. Unless you're part-time, you oftentimes have to have your gear in your vehicle because you're going to different places. But you have to have everything. You got to have your boots, your pants, you got to have your gloves, your coat, you got to have your helmet, your hood, all that. You got to have all your stuff together, because you don't know at whatever point you're going to be going from one station to another station. You can't leave, like, your mask, for example, somewhere, because that's pretty important when a fire pops off, right? So it's something that you constantly have to be ready for. Same thing when, like, at the beginning of your shift, you've got all the chores done and you're doing putting your stuff on the truck, for example. You got to check your equipment. It may have been great on the couple shifts before you're there, but there's been other people that have been using that equipment, right? So you got to make sure that it's up to par where you want it. If you're driving the truck, you got to do your truck check for that day. You got to check every single thing on the truck, make sure the fuel's good, make sure the water's there, because you need that. You just make sure that everything's good to go. So if you get a structure fire within 10 minutes from when you just checked in your truck, then you're ready. So the check-ins are a huge deal. You spend half the morning, but a good portion of the morning checking in your apparatus, your equipment, and whatnot. And then depending on the department, it kind of varies, but for the most part in the morning, there is a briefing so that the crews all get together for that unit day and they sit with their officer, and the officer explains, okay, these are the things that we have to get done today. This is what's on the calendar. This is some PR that we have to do, or this is the training that we're going to do today. based on whatever sort of resources that they have, so that all the crews know what's going on. Once that's done, for the most part, either you start your training or the crews may go to the grocery store to get their food for the day, because oftentimes you want to prep for lunch and dinner, so you got to get all the stuff for all of the people for each meal. So a lot of times people will put in either cash or Venmo or Cash App, however they do it, for the meals, and it's so many dollars per person in order to fund the meal. So obviously there's got to be that discussion of, oh, we're going to have this, we're going to have this. The people that don't cook don't have as much say, but that's another thing that when you're in the firehouse, you got to kind of learn to cook. You might get some people that are sticking the bun and like, I'm not going to cook, but it's a skill that they have to develop, that some don't know how to do until they come to the firehouse. They're very young firefighters and they've never learned how to cook before, but it's very important. But so they get all the food for the meals, and then obviously they come back, they cook lunch, eat the lunch, all while hoping that runs are going to come in, because anytime that a run comes in, like you're out, you drop what you're doing and you're going. And then afternoon time, you could have some secondary training there, or if you didn't get it in the morning, you do it then. Depending on the season, there's hydrant season, so we got to do hydrants, make sure they go around to the different hydrants, making sure that they open up and that they function properly, and then do any repairs if those are needed. And then there's also other times when you look at whether it's inspections or anything like that. It just depends on what time of year it is sometimes. But once all the training's done and there's a little bit of a lull in the afternoon, some people will get the opportunity to work out, because we do have we have a fitness room up here. So we do put a lot of value in health and fitness because it's important for the job. And then they pretty much start prepping for dinner, and then cook dinner and eat dinner. And then after dinner, it's kind of a time to either read or rest, recuperate with your crews, and then at some point, hopefully try to go to bed. But again, it's all like, if runs come in, then all that gets chopped up in some fashion.
Right.
So.
Okay. Do you have a kind of craziest structure fire story, or fires that you had to get out to and maybe go in, or anything like that?
I don't. There's been some interesting ones where it was a battery. It was one of those LiPo batteries that pretty much exploded because they have chemicals that'll come out of the battery that will catch upon itself. It's called thermal runaway. So then once that catches, and if there's too much pressure in whatever room that it's in, there'll be an explosion. So if you look at the windows of a garage from a LiPo battery fire, you'll see kind of these waves on the outside of the windows because it's pushed out, which is just crazy to see, because at first you're thinking, like, what happened here? But when you realize what was on fire, it then makes sense. That's why the batteries are kind of a bit of a hazard sometimes in homes and in garages because of what they can do.
Right. You're also you do fire inspections.
That's correct.
What does that entail when you go out for those?
So here at Springdale, I do, they believe me, as the fire marshal, will go out to whatever thousands of businesses that are here in Springdale, and I'll introduce myself to the business owner or manager, and I say, hey, your annual fire inspection. So every single year, there has to be at least one fire inspection for each business, or two for restaurants, because it's every 6 months that they have to have their hood system checked. And the hood system is the chemical that would come down over top of any sort of grease-laden appliances, and that has to be checked more often. So we try to go out to restaurants more often, and we look at that the fire extinguishers have been serviced properly, that the fire or that the hood system service as well, tagged right, that the fire alarm is within date, and that there's no egresses that are blocked, doors that are locked, things that you would look at or maybe not look at when you're out at a restaurant and think about. But whenever you learn about fire code and you're a firefighter, you start looking at these exit signs, or the door is blocked with this, and you don't really think about the negative what ifs, or have that situational awareness until you do it, and then it's all you ever look at.
Right.
I know my husband, when we went to a concert not too long ago, and he knew I'd do it because it was a couple different levels, and he saw like the exit signs on each of the levels at the doors. I was like, I wonder how many exits they have here. And then if something were to happen, which exit is closest to us? He's like, can you just stop and have a good time? But no, we just look at anything that could potentially cause a hazard, anything that's a fire code violation. And then if there's a violation, we would write that in the report. And then the business would have an opportunity 3 weeks to fix it. And then I'd come back out, re-inspect it, and then hopefully it's all good. And then we'd fill out another report, and then they're good to go for a year. So we do those inspections but inspections are not the only thing that I have to do, but it's the goal. It's the main thing. But
and I also saw you were a fire investigator too, as a part of International Association of Arson Investigators. So what are kind of some signs of arson that's maybe not you might find a match or something like that, maybe, I guess, but what are some other signs that are maybe not lesser known about?
So other than just finding a match or a gas can, it'd be finding accelerant points in different areas. So if there's an accelerant point like fuel, like gas, in one section, that might not be necessarily suspicious. But if you then see a pile here, and then you see a pile over here, and you see a pile in the living room, you see a pile in the basement, these accelerant spots in different areas that have been caught, that's going to throw up a red flag as far as potential arson. We never want to make a completely conclusive statement until we have all the evidence. We've tested all of our parts of the scientific method, all of our hypotheses. We want to go through that whole set of things before we say, this is what I believe the cause and origin is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you said something that I wasn't aware of. You were in the script writing and things like that. There's a show out there called Chicago Fire. One thing, do you watch that show, one, and how realistic is it, or any shows like that portraying the fire department, how realistic are they?
Well, you may already know what I'm going to say, but I don't watch it. I've heard about it, and I feel like I've asked that same question whenever I'm out and about, but they're not very realistic. They're very dramatic. There's been so many medical shows that I've watched that I'm like, they don't even have the patient hooked up to the monitor. How are they even reading this? And why are they shocking Sicily? And they're having them shock and students, so yeah, people in the medical fields, they're always overanalyzing all the stuff because they do get a little, showy, dramatic and whatnot. And it's high energy whenever there's a stressful EMS run, but it's never as dramatic as the shows, because they're entertainment, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
And finally, what do you say to the communities and things about just having fire safety, things they can do to make sure they're safe and things of that nature?
Mm-hmm. Well, the most basic thing that you can do at home is making sure that your smoke detectors are working, functioning, the batteries are good. Like they say, every time, fall back, spring forward, when you're changing your clocks, you can check those,
Mm-hmm.
right? As well as just having a conversation with your family members, whoever's in your house, especially if you have kids, talking to them about, not hiding if there's a fire, not going in the closet. Because, we're going to come in with gear. So that's why we have firehouse tours and whatnot. We show them what the firefighter looks like in plain clothes, and then what they look like with the gear on, a little bit like a Darth Vader type look, because like you hear that noise whenever we're going through. It's kind of scary, but we want the kids to get out. Yeah, get low. If there's smoke, you want to get low and go, is what they say. And you want to go out to the front yard at a meeting place where we can see that you guys are there. Because otherwise, if we are pulling up to a house and we don't have any information as far as what's going on, we're gonna search the house anyway. But for us to be able to see that everybody's out, in the front yard is great. So just having that conversation with people that you live with to be able to know, you know, what the plan is when it happens. Nobody ever wants to talk about it, but it is important to have that conversation so that when it does get a little crazy, nobody's throwing their hands up, saying, "Well, what do you want to do?" So
Right.
so
Yeah. Well, Fire Marshal Timmerman, appreciate you joining me today, kind of telling your story and telling us where you are and things of that nature. And appreciate you coming on for sure.
all right. Thank you. I appreciate your time.